Hello and welcome to another Monday Night Live. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Keith Moss. Good evening, Keith. How are you and how's your day been so far?
Good evening, Sam. It's been quite an eventful day, really. I've had an assessment this morning, which was in Essex, and then I've travelled up to Liverpool for 2 days of assessments, doing hazardous area assessments tomorrow and the next day. So busy.
Yeah, very busy. And hazardous area a little bit different from the normal electrotechnical assessments that we do?
They are conducted very much the same way, but the works that the contractors show us are within hazardous areas. So the first one tomorrow is the guy specialises in filling stations, and then the next day is in the gas industry. So the sites that we go to, very similar, really, industrial units.
Brilliant. Okay, so as per usual, we'll start off with our question of the week, which we posted out across social media. We'll go through our answer to that question and hopefully explain it to everybody. And then while the audience is putting their questions into the chat, we'll go through some of the questions we didn't get round to from previous Q&A sessions. So please remember, while you're putting your questions in the chat, remember there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. And we always ask people to remember to be respectful to each other in the chat, because the whole idea of this evening is that collectively we'll help each other out with the aim of improving our collective knowledge and understanding of all things BS 7671 and the world of electrical installations. So without further ado, let's have a look at our question of the week this week. So the question of the week this week was, what's the current carrying capacity of 2.5 squared twin and earth cable when installed above a plasterboard ceiling and covered in 150 of thermal insulation? And the optional answers that we gave were 32 amps, B 27 amps, C 21 amps, or D 17 amps. And the answer that we hoped you would give was D, 17 amps. So Keith, if I show the table, can we talk people through that?
Yep. So that should be table 4D5 that you're going to be showing there, Sam.
Yeah.
And that's for flat twin and earth cable, 70 degrees thermoplastic insulated. So flat twin and earths with an integral earth in them is what that table's all about. And if we're looking at there, if we look at method 101 and at the 2.5 cable, and where they cross section, that's on 100 mil of insulation, but we've got more than that. We've got 150 mil in there, so it's 17 amps is what we're saying there, which is remarkably a lot lower than what you'd expect it to be, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, if you look at pardon me, if you look at that same table, that would tell us that if that same cable were clipped direct, which generally has its best current carrying capacity, that'd be up at 27 amps. So we've greatly reduced its current carrying capacity purely by the way that we've installed it, and in particular the contact with thermal insulation, because thermal insulation is going to prevent the cable from getting rid of its excess heat. So the cable will be running warmer than it really wants to, which will then have a massive effect on its resistance and therefore its current carrying capacity. So it's something to certainly be aware of, and we've kind of bottomed that out in when we look at some of the things that we should consider. So there's a regulation within 7671 which talks about if we are using 2.5 twin and earth on a ring main that's protected by a 30 or 32 amp protective device, then we have to ensure that the current carrying capacity of the conductors in the ring are at least 20 amps. So in that situation where, because of the detrimental effects of the way we've installed it and the environment in which we've installed it, we've reduced the current carrying capacity to 17 amps, then it wouldn't be appropriate to be used as part of a ring if protected by a 30 or 32 amp overcurrent protective device.
No, and often we do see it, Sam, on a sheet when we have reference, someone's put incorrect reference down, maybe 103, which actually you can't have a 32 amp ring main on at all with 2.5 cable. So it might not be installed wrong, it might just be the wrong reference that you've put down there, which highlights to us that something could be wrong.
Yeah. But it is a key factor, isn't it, that you've got to, and I know it's something we've talked about in the past, about sometimes the detrimental effect of the wiring route that you choose, or the wiring system that you choose, and the sort of the poor effect that can have, in particular on current carrying capacity. Same for burying cables as well. You know, that can have a huge effect, and often it's not considered because people just base their design on the fact that the current carrying capacity will be as it were for clipped direct, which isn't always the case.
It's always worth finding out, if it's a new house, how much insulation's going in the loft and what would be the best place to run your cables, preferably out of them altogether.
Yeah.
So clip direct would be your best method if you could clip it direct on something else, but not in the joists.
Yeah. Get it up above the thermal insulation.
Yeah.
Okay, so please do put your questions into the chat, and if you put your questions into the chat, we'll do our best to answer them this evening. While we're waiting for some questions to come in the chat, we'll just have a look at ones that have been issued in the past that we've not got round to. So the first one of those that we'll take a look at tonight is a common question that we get because people ask why. So the question is, what classification code should be given to incorrect or reverse polarity between line and neutral? Our answer for that is incorrect polarity at the origin of the installation is recommended as a classification code C1, danger present. And I think at first take a lot of people ask why C1? Well, it's all to do with the fact that if we're using ADS, automatic disconnection of supply, as our protective measure, and it's recognised within 7671 that it's the most commonly used protective measure, then if we've got our protective device incorrectly in the neutral conductor because we've got a polarity issue, then it means that when the protective device operates, it will not disconnect the supply from the faulty circuit, and what is our line conductor, which has been sensed within the installation as neutral because we've got polarity issues, that will still be live, and if the fault is a line to earth fault, then for example exposed conductive parts of the equipment could become live and therefore a major shock risk. So that's why it's considered danger present and recommended as a classification code C1. It's all to do with the fact that it's tied in with, normally we have an overcurrent protective device in the line conductor, but if we've got reverse polarity, that will be in the neutral conductor, which means that it won't have disconnected the line and the line conductor will still be live. Would you add anything to that, Keith?
No, I think that's about it, Sam. I mean, it really is. It is a proper danger that I think a lot of people don't really understand, and it is the fact that it won't disconnect if there is a fault. So yeah.
Okay, question 2, another one that we often get asked on the technical helpline, where a C2 classification code has been attributed to an observation, how long is deemed acceptable to carry out the remedial action to make the installation satisfactory? So what's our thoughts there, Keith?
Sam, that's 28 days. The landlord's got to initiate repairs on that. It could be less if the engineer carrying out the EICR deems it that it is so dangerous it needs to be less than 28 days, he can also refer to that as a shorter time. And the 28 days is a statutory thing, so it needs to be repaired. If the tenant, I believe, if the tenant's already in there, they don't have to move out. But you can't put a new tenant in either in that 28 days until it's repaired. But if the tenant's there, that was why there would be a shorter period. We would be recommended maybe 5 days or whatever, or immediate.
Yeah, and that's so that 28 days guidance comes from the private rented sector legislation, and although there isn't actually a time specified in 7671, what 7671 says is that anything that's got a C2 should be dealt with as a matter of urgency by a skilled person competent in electrical work. And as you've rightly said, the reason why it's specified as a skilled person competent in electrical work is that they'll be able to clarify any danger, and then they'll be able to give the danger an appropriate remedial action time. So as Keith said, you could reduce it from 28 if you felt that it was inherently dangerous and needed to be remedial work carried out to make it safe in a more timely fashion. So yeah, that's why it must be done by a skilled person competent in electrical installation work. It's because one of those skills is to be able to ascertain the appropriate danger.
Sam, I think that's just in England as well, isn't it? I think Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland,
yes,
it isn't specified as 28 days, but it is recommended as a reasonable time for it to be carried out in.
Yeah, and so that's, when people ask us, that's what we say, that there's nothing specified in 7671, but because of the guidance that really comes through that legislation, that's a good guide to use. But yeah, you were 100% right to say, first of all, that under certain circumstances it might be required a lot quicker based on the degree of danger and the users of the installation. Okay, another one that we've seen before is this one was quite interesting. So when determining maximum demand of an installation, can I apply diversity to final circuits supplying electrical charging equipment? And the simple answer is yes. So yes, you can, but it was a change. So originally, when vehicle charging was introduced into 7671, and even just as recently as 2018, which, well, I suppose it is 6 years ago now, but it doesn't feel like 6 years ago sometimes. It was very different, but it is very clear now that there was a change made in BS 7671 18th edition Amendment 1 to reflect that there are intelligence now into most electric vehicle charging equipment. That includes load monitoring, load sharing equipment to prevent electric vehicle charging equipment trying to pull its full load current from the installation supply if there's insufficient spare capacity due to other connected loads. So there's a regulation now which I've put up on screen, which actually says, let me just change. So there's a regulation that says load curtailment, including load reduction or disconnection, either automatically or manual, may be taken into account while determining maximum demand of the installation or part thereof. So it's clarified now within 7671, but we will just show you, just for sense sake. Originally it was very different. So originally it did say that it shall be considered that in the single charging point you would have to base it on its rated current, and diversity may be allowed for a distribution circuit supplying multiple vehicle charging equipment if available. So it was very, very different, and perhaps considered something that needed to be corrected when it was first introduced in 2018 Amendment 1. But as I show you, if I show you now, that the regulation is quite clear now that load curtailment, including load reduction or disconnection, either automatically or manually, may be taken into account when determining maximum demand. So now if you've got intelligence built in, which ensures that it only takes from the supply when there's sufficient spare, you can include that in your diversity calcs.
And doesn't Part S of the building reg state that you are only allowed to fit smart chargers now on new builds? I think they say that you're not allowed to fit what they call dumb chargers anymore.
Yeah, certainly on the installations covered by Part S, which tend to be the sort of the residential blocks, larger. So Part S was introduced really after the original push to get single charge points onto single domestic properties. Then Part S is really about putting the infrastructure in for larger. So if we've got a residential blocks of flats, but also non-residential, so commercial, normal car parks, all of those are covered by the requirements in Part S, and that does require it. And as you say, this term smart charger, one of the things is that it's got that inbuilt ability to be able to do load management. Okay, so we'll have a look at another one while we're just waiting. So again, a common question that we get asked, if it's not practical to run a bonding conductor to an extraneous conductive part, is it acceptable to box in the extraneous conductive part to make it inaccessible? What's our thoughts there, Keith?
Well, the simple answer will be yes, because a definition of an extraneous conductive part is a conductive part that is likely to introduce a potential, generally earth potential, and not forming part of the electrical installation. So if you can then box that in, it can't be touched simultaneously with any other part of a forming part of the electrical installation. So yes, it can be boxed in.
Yeah,
it might not always be practically possible, but yes, you could.
Yeah, and sometimes that's maybe more practical than if the extraneous conductive part is quite a distance from the main earth terminal, so to actually get a bonding conductor to there would be more work than actually bonding in the extraneous conductive part. Then it's certainly and as you say, it's if we make it so that it's inaccessible, then we remove that bit that says liable to introduce a potential, or so if it can't be touched, it can't introduce a potential, and therefore doesn't become an extraneous conductive part anymore. The other one that we quite often get asked in association with this is, if I can't run a bonding conductor because they don't want to do damage to a newly decorated property, can I simply put it to an earth stake? And the answer to that one is no, because that's again possibly introducing a different potential into the installation that may not already be there. So if we've got, for example, a TNCS installation or a TNS installation, those may, the DNO's networking earthing system may be a different potential from true earth at the property, and therefore introducing the true earth through an earth stake would again be introducing a potential that could be different, and therefore we can create that potential difference and that shock risk. So no to installing an earth rod to connect it to, but yes to boxing it in. Okay, some of the questions that were coming in, a nice simple one to start with. So should I be working to Amendment 3 of BS 7671 now? Well, yes, you should be. It was it came into effect immediately because of the change involved. So yeah, work that you've designed since the date that it was published should be carried out to Amendment 3, bearing in mind that it was quite a small change in Amendment 3, so it didn't have a huge effect on installations. It was particularly associated with instances where you've got bidirectional flow of energy or current, whichever way you want to describe it, and therefore need bidirectional protective devices. But yeah, you should be, anything designed and installed now should be done to Amendment 3. If you had, if it was a large enough project that it was designed before Amendment 3 was published, then you did have the option. You could still work to Amendment 2, but you would need to certificate to Amendment 2, and you would need to, we would always recommend checking the contractual requirements of your job, because although working to Amendment 2 for an Amendment 2 designed project would still be compliant with 7671, you may have some contractual requirements to meet, such that, for example, it's that the work is done to the latest version of BS 7671, in which case then it would need to be Amendment 3. But yeah, that's really the case in a nutshell. Do you get still questions out there about which version they should be working to, Keith?
I do, yeah, because I think a few people thought that the Amendment 3 part was only specifically if you was doing PV. But really it's an amendment to BS 7671, so that's what we should be working to. It might not be incorporated into the works that you're doing, but the amendment still stands for the whole of the regs.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you complete that certificate or condition report, there'll be a declaration to say which version of 7671 did you install it to, which version did you design it to, which version did you test and inspect it to. So that has to tie up, that it has to be the one that you've actually worked to. If a house has a 3-phase supply, is it still considered domestic or is it classified as commercial? So if it is a house, a residential property, it is domestic. We're seeing this more and more now, and I believe there's one of the distribution network operators that are providing 3-phase supplies as standard. So yeah, it's nothing to do with whether it's 3-phase or single phase. It's whether it is a domestic property, a residential home, that determines whether it's domestic or not. Not the number of phases or the voltages available in the supply. It purely is the type of work. So as I say, we're seeing more and more, especially with in the future that the elimination of gas from new build properties means that we're going to have a lot more electrification, whether that be through boilers or through other renewable heating technologies. But certainly there's going to be more and more electricity.
I think people need to be aware as well, Sam, that the safe isolation for the 3-phase system will be slightly different to the single phase, but it may be the guys who are doing domestic installations might want to brush up on that a little bit, not so much the AC guys. You probably do come across it quite regular, but just to be aware, it's 400 volts in there.
Yeah, so it's 400 volts between line conductors.
Lines.
Yeah, so yeah, be careful. Not all test equipment, for example, will be able to cope with that voltage when you're looking at things like fault currents. So yeah, just be aware, as Keith says. Good point. This must be one of the classics in. Can you tell me which BS 7671 regulation gives the permitted distance between a socket outlet and a kitchen sink?
It doesn't.
In a nutshell, there is no distance specified in 7671. There's in section 528, there's lots of information regarding the proximity of non-electrical services to electrical services. And there's guidance to make sure that the where an electrical service is installed in proximity to one or more non-electrical service, it should be arranged that any foreseeable operation carried out on the other service will not cause damage to the electrical service, or vice versa. So the intention is that the electrical service shouldn't have an adverse effect on the other service, and the other service shouldn't have an adverse effect on the electrical service. It tends to be water, sometimes gas, but yeah, they should be suitable distancing between the two, and if you can't get suitable distancing, then 7671 does also talk about the use of mechanical or thermal shielding. There's some general guidance. So there's some general guidance on Electrical Safety First's RAG Q&A database. So if you look at the RAG Q&A database, there's some guidance on there, and there's also some the RAG database talks about it's good practice to install them at least a distance of 300 mil horizontally from the extremity of the sink bowl. That's excluding the drainer or the wash basin opening, to any electrical accessory. And that guidance, I think, is also repeated in the electrician's guide to the building regs. But there's no distance specified in 7671. It's a common question and a common myth that there's a reg in 7671 which specifies a distance.
So that's what I was going to say. The Electrician's Guide to the Building Regs is quite a good book, but it's non-statutory, of course, and there might be local regulations from some building authorities that would want it a specified distance. As you say, it isn't in the regs, isn't in 7671, although we do find sometimes there's a distance given in the gas regs between electrical and gas products. So there's a recommendation for cabling between gas pipes, but it's not in 7671 again.
Yeah. Okay, just looking through. Again, a common question we get asked: what should I do when I find a TNCS system with a ZE much greater than the specified 0.35 ohms? Okay, the first thing I'd say is that the 0.35 ohms isn't a maximum. It's a value which is agreed to enable people to do design. So if they know that they're going to be receiving a supply that's a TNCS supply, they can do their design in order to achieve required ZS's and therefore the required disconnection times based on that TNCS value of 0.35. However, the DNO don't have to stick to that value. They will do their best to stick to that value on a new installation, but we do hear it from time to time, quite often, that it's slightly higher than that, and then when they've been called out, they've said that it's stable and they've got no intention of doing anything to reduce it to 0.35. So it's not a minimum threshold that they have to achieve, but it is a value that's given really for design purposes. Our advice, if you do get instances where the actual value does exceed 0.35, we always recommend to get the building owner to contact the DNO, or if they're happy and you're happy, for you to contact the DNO on their behalf and explain the situation. In particular, if you've got evidence that previously it was a lower value, so you've got evidence of how it's increased over time, because that may be an indication of a possible fault in the distribution network. But yeah, just the fact that it's above 0.35 doesn't mean they will come out. It's not an issue if it doesn't cause you an issue within the installation, i.e. if you can still meet all the ZS requirements for your protective devices and you're still achieving the required disconnection times, it's not an issue. But again, recording it will allow the next person, or perhaps you at a later date, to see if it's getting any worse. So if it's detrimentally changing, then again, that's good information to feed back to the DNO. Come across those situations, Keith, out there?
Yeah, I have on TNS rather than TNCS when you get there and you do a ZE, and it's
it's over the 0.8. I think Keith.
But
yeah, I think you might have froze just for a little bit, but you're back now.
Oh, sorry about that. You know, I was saying I had it on TNCS, but TNS, but not on TNCS. And the TNCS generally is pretty stuck, I think.
Yeah, and so similar type approach for, I guess, on TNS, in that it's just the value is 0.8, but again, it's not something that they have to achieve. Again, it's a guide for design purposes, isn't it?
Probably one of the reasons why it was recommended that supplementary earth rod was put in the last reg SAM as well. So if it does break down, you could always end up with a stable, then in effect TT circuit, couldn't you?
Yeah, and so yeah, it's something that you do need to think about. You know, it's one thing that it's a higher value, but does it actually affect the installation? I.e., are you still achieving your ZSs? And in most instances, you know, you may have RCDs that will enable you to do that. So you could still continue with the installation. It would still be deemed safe if you've got, for example, 30 milliamp RCD protection on everything. But again, it would be worth reporting to the DNO because it may be an indication of a potential fault. Let's have a look at some coming in. So again, another one: can socket outlets be fixed internally to kitchen units? So I think commonplace that people will find, in particular, socket outlets for appliances fitted into the kitchen units that those appliances are contained in. So we are allowed to do that, Keith? Yeah,
we are indeed, as long as it's suitably sited and it's fitted to something that isn't going to be flapping about. Yes, we can do that, and if it's a spur that's in there and it isn't completely obvious what it's feeding, it just needs to be suitably labelled.
Yeah, and again, this is a question that's covered by the Wiring Regs Advisory Group, the RAG Frequently Asked Questions, on our colleagues at Electrical Safety First website. So there's a question there that can accessories and electrical equipment such as socket outlets and undercovered lighting be fixed to fitted kitchen units? That's there, and again the answer is yes. As long as they're securely fixed to rigid parts of the units that are not demountable or otherwise liable to be disturbed in normal service. So yeah, not a real issue. You know, again, providing they're suitably installed. Okay. So what is the required IP rating for outdoor lighting? Okay, we just have to. There's a special location section in 7671 714 which covers outdoor lighting, and it tells us that electrical equipment shall have by construction or by installation a degree of protection at least IP33. So that's the minimum. Don't forget, BS 7671 is a minimum. We can always go more, so you could always go 44 or higher, but as a minimum for compliance with 7671, it would have to be at least IP33.
I think there'd be a few people shocked by that, Sam, really, how low that is. But that doesn't mean that isn't underneath a canopy, does it?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be direct into the rain, IP33. You wouldn't be able to put it there. So the minimum requirement won't be suitable for all situations.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's, you know, most people I think would have thought 44 or maybe even higher, but as I say, that's a minimum, and like you say, it could be that that's under the eaves, so you know it's quite well protected by the environment that it's in, but it is a minimum standard, and as I say, 7671 you can always go above. Okay, we've got we'll just take one more. Oh, and again another classic. How high off the floor or above a worktop should a socket outlet be installed? Okay, again there's no dimension in 7671, but if we do look in 7671, there is a regulation that makes it quite clear. So it says a socket outlet on a wall or similar structure shall be mounted at a height above the floor or any working surface to minimise the risk of mechanical damage to the socket outlet or to an associated plug and its flexible cable, which might be caused during insertion, use or withdrawal of the plug. So we've got some guidance, and I'll talk about our pocket guide in a minute, but we've got some guidance which says that we'd recommend a minimum height of 100 mil to the bottom of a socket outlet from a worktop or a finished floor, but you must consider what the socket will be used for, because if it's been used for a particular item of equipment with a particular plug and a particular cable style, then you may need to consider that, because we want to make sure that it's going to be safe during its normal use, but typically 100 mil. And I just want to show our pocket guide app. So for those of you that are NIC certified, we've got a freely downloadable pocket guide. It's absolutely jam-packed with information. There are some useful calculators on there as well, but I do know that one of the old pocket guides, Pocket Guide 5, specifically talks about that height of socket outlets above the floor and above the worktops, in particular in kitchens. So 100 mil. Okay, we've run out of questions in the pot, so I can only assume that everybody's happy. If not, please do put your questions in, and if we haven't got round to them this evening, then we'll certainly get round to them next time. Just before we go, we do want to tell you about the wire. So again, for our NIC EIC certified businesses, we run a series of webinars under the wire. Just bear with me a minute. Yeah, one has commented that best practice, guys, incorrect polarity at origins C1 but on individual circuits as C2. What's the reason for this? Surely a C1 for both. It really depends on if you're after or before a protective device. So that's why if it's incorrect polarity at the origin, then the whole installation downstream of that will be affected. So that's why the difference, in that it's seen as a C1 at the origin, but then if it's a C2 elsewhere, then those upstream protective devices will still be operatable. So that's why there's seen as a difference. Somebody's just put that into the chat, so hopefully that's explained it. So as I was saying, we've got one more wire webinar in the series this year, and it just so happens that it falls this Thursday, the 5th of December, and it's our annual festive quiz. So if you are interested, it's a bit of fun. It's normally pretty good. Multiple choice questions. You definitely need your regs book and a calculator, but yeah, if you're after a little bit of entertainment, 7671 based on Thursday night, then please do register for the wire quiz and take part. I think this is about the third or fourth year we've been running it, and it does get a good audience. Please do stay in touch. You know, if you're interested, we've got connections right the way across our social media platforms: X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Please do. We've got one more coming. EICR, cooker control unit in cooker space, no socket outlet. What code if no signs of thermal damage? So cooker control unit in cooker space. So not really. I think we'd need a little bit more information in order to be able to say what classification code, because we just need a little bit more information there as to what are the issues, what's the inspector seeing that leads us to believe that it's there's danger or potential danger or a possible improvement, but haven't got enough information there, I'm afraid. So yeah, please do stay in touch, and thank you for participating. Because of the way we start the new year, we're not going to hold the first live Q&A until Thursday the 9th of January, but if you've found this one useful and you'd like to participate in one next year, then please do put that date in your diary, and we'll be back live at 8 o'clock on Thursday the 9th of January. Any final thoughts from you, Keith?
The person who just said about the cooker control panel, I wonder whether they was thinking whether it was directly behind the cooker, which could have some thermal constraints on the cooker control panel. So yeah, I think you'd have to take that on a case by case, really, Sam, wouldn't you? What you also wouldn't want to have is a load of steam going in it when something is cooking on it as well. So on that one, I would just do it as a case by case and have a look and make sure that it hasn't been thermally damaged. But I hope that is what the person was asking. I'm not too sure. Yeah,
it's possible. And then I think, yeah, you've got to, based on its location, you've got to think, well, how long has it been there and what shines? So, you know, isolate, open it up and have a look to see if there are signs of moisture and water ingress, to see if there's any signs of thermal damage from being in close proximity to the item of equipment. But yeah, there's nothing of standard that says it has to be this. So yeah, I think safely isolate and some inspection might help there. But generally, as you say, there's lots and lots of cooker control units installed towards the back of the oven. There tends to be a period where there are no heat, so there's no gas rings, there's no electric rings, and therefore they can be quite protected from that heat going up. But again, it does depend very much on its actual location. So I think safely isolate and a good inspection will give you the best information there.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. Thanks very much, Keith, for participating. Always good to see you. We do hope that you, if you get the opportunity, you'll take part in the end of year quiz on the wire on this Thursday. If not, please hope that you do have a bit of a break over the festive period, and hopefully we'll see you when we're back in January.
And I'd just like to say the same, happy Christmas to everybody, and try and get some downtime is what I would suggest for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.